How's it going today, everybody? Welcome back to Troy's Hobbies RC. Today on the channel, we're going to be kind of revamping one of my older trucks that you've seen on the channel previously. This is my RGT Tracer. It obviously has had a couple of changes done to it. We've put an aftermarket body on it and some different wheels and tires, but this truck is still largely bone stock. I've only driven it a handful of times. And we're going to be switching out the axles to these Injora portal crawler axles. And here in just a moment, I'm going to explain to you guys why we're making this swap. This vehicle does come with metal portal axles already. But here in just a second, I'm going to explain to you why we're doing the swap. So let's get into this build. Okay, before we get into this axle build, I just wanted to go over why we are actually doing this. What I have down here, even though this says HSP, these are actually the correct upper portal axles for the stock metal housings on this RGT truck. And the problem that I'm having here, let me pop this one out of the bag here, is these shafts. These shafts are made of like a pot metal or some sort of like an alloy, and I'm snapping them off all the time. Every single time I've driven this truck, except for the very first time, I've snapped an axle right here at this ball head. And this is, I think I've gone through 5 or 6 of these. So that's the main reason why we're swapping out to the Injora portal axles. Just simply because the housings themselves on the stock RGT are excellent. They're a really nice aluminum or steel, whatever metal they're using, but the components themselves inside seem to be what the weak point is. So we're going to go ahead and swap out to these Injoras. We're going to do a full teardown, right? We have to do a full teardown on these. We're going to put grease in the gears, in the main gear, and in the portals. And then we're going to go through all the screws themselves, add thread lock, and then install them onto the truck. So I'm going to go ahead and get you guys set up on the time lapse, and we'll go ahead and start cracking into this truck, tearing it down, and let's see what we can get done today. See if we can make these new portals work out. Alright, one more thing before we start on this build here. I just want to show you guys how this all comes packaged in the box. Right on top, you'll have a protective layer of foam, and then right underneath that you get your bag of hardware. It also contains your wheel hexes and your axle nuts. So don't lose this. You will be needing those to complete the axles. You have your rear housing here. Everything comes nice and packaged in this nice dense foam container here. So there's really no chance in anything getting damaged. Here is a look at the rear housing, which you guys have seen in the thumbnail and a few of the other shots of the video already. Really, really nice. So that's the rear housing. Got the front housing here, ready to go with your steering knuckles and everything else on it. So you'll be able to set up your steering and all that. So that's really nice to see. And then you have your steering link itself here. It's a nice metal steering link with plastic rod ends. So nice stable there. And then your servo linkage. So this right here, you'll be connecting to your steering and your servo. It kind of imitates like a steering ram style setup, but this is a fixed linkage. So as far as I can tell, you can't adjust this in any way. Alright, we're back real quick from that time lapse, and there's just something I wanted to share with you guys real quick. Anytime you have one of these custom kind of jobs here where you're going from one type of vehicle or one setup to another, you're always going to have these little weird things that don't quite match up, or you've got to kind of do a little bit of custom work to make it work. Case in point here with our shock mounts and our lower link mounts. This is the stock one that comes on the Injora, and this is the one that comes on the RGT. Now, as you can see, the one with the RGT is much larger. It's more fanned out, and what that does is it allows for the rod ends here and the rod ends on the lower links, which I'm going to have to change out for standard rod ends, which I do have right here. That will allow them to then fit correctly into the Injoras. So we'll just have to do a little bit of swapping around and a little bit of messing about, but it's not a big deal. It's just one of these things you have to be ready, kind of ready and willing to play around and experiment with a few things here and there and see what works and what doesn't. So let's go ahead and get back into the time lapse. I'm going to start tearing down this axle and rebuilding it, greasing it, and doing all that stuff. Putting thread lock on all the bolts and then reinstalling it. And then once we have it reinstalled, I will go over anything I had to do with it, like any kind of custom work or any kind of adjustments I had to make, and I'll let you know. And then we will go ahead and finish up the back after that. Alright guys, we have this thing about 50% complete. We got the front all set up. Let's talk about what I had to do to actually make this thing happen. So anytime you have kind of like a custom project like this, where you're swapping ready to run parts over to aftermarket parts, especially with what we would consider like a non-traditional platform like the RGT here. The only reason I consider it non-traditional, obviously it's your traditional style crawler, but it's not something traditionally found in the United States market. And so sometimes these aftermarket companies don't take these overseas brands into consideration when it comes to their suspension designs and their geometry and things like that. So you kind of have to mess around a little bit, find where you need to maybe make some compromises, do some customization and things like that. Case in point, this truck, I had to mess with the suspension geometry just a little bit to get the suspension back to at least usable. This truck has very, very limited suspension to begin with. I think these are only like 70 or 80 millimeter shocks. They're very, very short for what this truck is. I will be upgrading these to like a traditional 90 millimeter shock, like you would find on an SEX10 or something like that. The extra 20 millimeters of travel would do this truck a lot of good. I wouldn't do too much with the ride height, but I would definitely do something about the travel. It does a good job, but not a great job. It gets up there, it flexes a decent amount, but we could definitely get it flexing even more. It's not really limited by geometry or anything like that. Just the suspension travel itself. We had to use the RGT. Well, we didn't have to, but I chose to use the RGT wheel hexes on here. They're just a little bit wider offset. I like a wider offset wheel personally, just for the added traction, side hill control, things of that nature. It doesn't take away too much on the narrow trails. Just adds a little bit of stability overall. We did have to use the RGT shock mounts and lower link mounts. Just because, like I said, with the geometry and the design of things, they didn't necessarily have the design of this truck in mind for these Injora axles. So you had to kind of play around and find what works with this thing, and that's what we did. And we got it to work. We just had to mount all of the shock and mount links to the outside of the link to give it the proper articulation and make it work the way it was supposed to do. But we ended up doing that just fine. We did have to change here. I'll just go ahead and put the front. This here is the front, and I'll tell you about some of the mods we did on the front to make this work as well. As I said, you put all of the mounts to the outside of the link mount. That helps with the geometry and things like that. But all of the rod ends, okay, all of the rod ends have to be replaced. You have to replace it from these big, chunky RGT style ones to these smaller, just more traditional style ball end. And once you do that, everything slides into place really nice. Everything feeds in perfectly, and nothing really seems to be out of whack or out of place. And it worked really nice. And then the last thing we did is we flipped the lower links around. So it just basically acts as a lower skid here. It protects the drive shaft just a little bit better. I felt comfortable doing that since the truck runs portals, right? And since the links almost come in line with those portals or the axle line itself, I felt comfortable losing just a little bit of that ground clearance there to make up for here. And if it doesn't work out, it's no big deal. We can just flip them right back around, back to the stock location, and gain all of that ground clearance right back. So, you know, that may actually be something I do depending on the first run and how I feel how it drives. So, other than that, let's go ahead and fire it up. I'm not going to drive it yet because these axles are going two different directions. So, I just want to show you guys the servo. We did go ahead and change the servo. This is just generic Amazon 45 kilogram. This truck comes stock with 15 kilogram servos. So like very, very, very weak servos. So we just went ahead and upped the torque with this guy. We are losing rear steer with this setup. So I wanted to make up for the steering somewhere along the line. Alright, I do need to trim the thing out just a little bit here. But that's no big deal. But we do have plenty of throw, plenty of speed and torque. You know, I'm probably going to turn my dual rates down and things like that because that's way too fast for a crawler. But we'll get this thing set back up properly with the trim and everything else here, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to the back. I'm going to go ahead and do the back largely off camera. And so if I run into anything crazy or anything weird, I'll get back to you guys once the back of this truck is finished up. It's going to be largely the same process without the headache of setting up your steering. So alright everybody, it's been a few hours actually since the last time you guys saw me here on the screen. I got the rear axle installed. As you can see, everything's on here now. We've got the rear axle installed. Everything is installed on the vehicle. But I want to explain why I was off screen for so long and what the dilemma was. This truck comes stock with a two-way transmission. So like one drive shaft spins one direction, the other drive shaft spins the other direction. And these axles do not allow for you to flip the differential around like a traditional one would be. You could flip it and everything would be fine that way. But this particular vehicle doesn't quite allow for that. So what I had to do was dig through all of my parts bin and find an old axial transmission that I had laying around from God knows when. The single speed regular direct drive transmission, and it bolted directly in. It went directly in. The motor went in. The only difference was the spur gear on the stock RGT was a 48 pitch, and the stock spur gear on the axial transmission here is a 32 pitch. So you went from 48 pitch to 32 pitch. So we had to change the pinion gear. And it came stock with a little bitty, itty bitty 9-tooth 48 pitch pinion gear. And so I tried to do a 9-tooth 32 pitch to go tooth for tooth, and it didn't mesh. Like it was too small. So I had to bump this thing all the way up to a 15, which is way too much for a crawler. And but as soon as I get some new pinions, we're gonna bump that back down to like an 11 or 12, depending on what actually fits on this setup. I want to gear it down as much as I possibly can. But now everything rotates the correct direction. It's all steering correctly. The truck is functioning. There's thread lock where there needs to be thread lock. The suspension has been adjusted a little bit. I think I need to go down one more notch on that. But I'm going to show you guys that everything is functional now. We've got steering. Really good steering on that now. And forward gear. There we go. Forward and reverse working perfectly fine. Transmission sounds perfect. I just re-greased it, checked all the bearings, everything was smooth. We greased everything up in the axle housings, Loctited all the screws, and that's pretty much everything, you guys. So we added the servo, changed the transmission. We did a bunch of stuff to this thing to make it work, but we finally got this thing functional, and it'll be exciting to get this thing back on the trails, because it's been almost a year since I've driven this truck. So it'll be nice to get it back out and see what it's capable of now. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today on Troy's Hobbies RC. That was a revamp, an axle swap of the RGT Tracer. This thing I've had for about a year. We just needed to do a new axle update on it. The stock axles were having a problem breaking the upper portal axle shaft, so I replaced it with the Injoras. But in order to do that, I had to install a whole new transmission and do a lot of little custom things and whatnot to get this thing to function right. So if you ever decide to take a project on like this, make sure you have all the little details. Take your time with it. Little things are going to frustrate you. I had this truck completely back together and found out that the transmission goes two different directions. So I had to take it all back apart, find a new transmission, put that in, and then I finally got this thing to function the way I wanted it to. But that's going to be it for today, you guys. Next time you guys see this thing, we're going to get it out on the trails. We're going to see how these improvements affected the vehicle. It improved the performance. We did lose rear steering, but we added a much more powerful front servo. So it should be 50-50 as far as what we lost versus what we gained. And yeah, I'm really excited to get this thing back out on the trails. It's been a long time since I've driven it, and I'm excited to see what it can do nowadays. So I guess I'll just give you guys a big thumbs up. Thanks you guys for watching. Like the video if you guys can. Subscribe if you guys are new. Make sure you guys follow us on all of our social media on Facebook and Instagram at Troy's Hobbies RC. And make sure you check our website, troyshobbiesrc.com, for all kinds of new stuff. Everything that you want for Colorado RC Monster Truck Challenge, and all kinds of updates in the future. So that's going to be it. Thanks for watching. See you later.